Ukraine. Now, I was pleased in the Prime Minister's statement to hear the unequivocal approach he's taken to responsibility in this regard, and rightly pinning it on one person, Vladimir Putin. He did, however, equivocate in relation to his response to the Leader of the Opposition with regards to the G8. Now, Katja Kallas from the European Union was very clear in her comments this morning that Russia cannot be in the G8. She said definitely not. Surely he agrees with that.
Well, look, I mean, Russia's the aggressor here, and obviously these are questions for the G7 to determine. But I can tell him the focus is very much on the process at the moment, which is getting the ceasefire and getting an end to this conflict. Can I join him in his question, in the point he makes about those on the left? Because the Green Party, of course, says we should pull out of NATO at a moment like this. They also say, by the way, that they would make renting a property landlords unlawful, but selling drugs lawful. I have to say, I find that a little odd outside the school gate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week in Rochdale, I joined our proud Ukrainian community to mark the Holodomor, which was Stalin's forced famine of millions of Ukrainians in the 1930s. There's a modern-day Holodomor been going on in Ukraine thanks to the drone strikes and airstrikes of Putin's regime. So does he share my disgust, absolute disgust, at the treacherous actions of the former leader of Reform in Wales, who had lined his own pockets with cash from the Russian regime? And does he agree that Reform UK's refusal to carry out a full investigation just proves they really are Putin's poodles?
Well, can I agree with him? This is clearly a really serious case. If any other party would want to investigate to assure itself that how did this happen? This is not a minor transgression. This is something that's now been visited with a 10-year sentence because it undermines our country. Surely the Reform leadership would want to know, how did that happen on their watch? And also, what other links are there between their party and Russia? No wonder they're Putin-friendly. How on earth could they respond to a situation like this? There's no point standing up and saying you support Ukraine if within your own party you are pro-Russian.
Sandra Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's role in marshalling European cooperation is essential and very welcome. Would it not be obscene and unconscionable for any country, indeed one that is one of the permanent five at the United Nations, that has invaded their neighbour, murdered its citizens, to get away with it, to profit from it, let alone rejoining the G7? Mr. Speaker, have we not seen this film before? Do we not know how it ends?
I'm grateful for him for raising this. That is why it is really important that we make the case for and ensure that it's a just and lasting peace, because we have seen this before. We've seen agreements brokered before without security guarantees, with the inevitable result that Putin will go again. And that's why, in relation to all of the principles I've been operating on, setting up the coalition willing, and in all my discussions, it's got to be a just and lasting peace. It's got to be one that actually deters Putin from doing this again, because we know that without that deterrence, without those consequences, he has the ambition to go again, and he will go again, and we must guard against that.
Uma Kumaran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for his steadfast leadership on Ukraine? My constituent, Roxolana, is one of the tens of thousands of Ukrainian families with a loved one missing under special circumstance. Families who don't know if their loved ones are detained, a prisoner of war, or even alive. It's likely Russia has not notified the ICRC on the status of thousands more prisoners of war. On behalf of Roxolana and of all the Ukrainian families I met this weekend at St Mary's Ukrainian School, can the Prime Minister assure this House that the UK will support every effort to ensure that Russia complies with international humanitarian law regarding the treatment and identification of prisoners of war who are their loved ones and their families?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank her for raising this, and also for her work bearing down on this, in particular the meeting she had at the weekend. This is a really serious issue. We are raising it with our allies. It is further evidence of the total disregard that Russia has for any of the principles of war, even in an unjust war, and we will continue to bear down on it.
Gavin Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 18 months, the Prime Minister has shown himself to be influential and purposeful at significant times in this crisis, so I thank him for that. Mr. Speaker, whilst events may be superseding the statement this afternoon, there are some principles that should not change. Aggression must not be rewarded. Violence should not pay. There has always been an alternative to violence. But when the Prime Minister says rightly that there should be a just and a lasting peace, does he recognise that it may be difficult to sell a lasting peace to the people of Ukraine if so-called allies are forcing President Zelensky to accept an encroachment on his sovereign territory, and that those allies should be robustly defending Ukraine rather than allowing so-called friends to allow the loss of territory?
Well, can I thank him and give him my assurance that I'm acutely aware of the need for this to be a lasting peace for Ukrainians. That is a large part of my discussion with President Zelensky as to how we bring that about. But I'm extremely mindful of the fact this has to be just and lasting for the Ukrainians who didn't start this war, don't want this war, have suffered hugely under this war, and need to be reassured that if there is a peace, it is going to last, and they're not going to be subject to the same thing in just a few years' time.
Nia Griffith.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I very much commend my right honourable friend's efforts to engage our allies in support for Ukraine. And does he agree that resolve, unity and support from the West is absolutely vital to give Ukraine the guarantees that it needs for a lasting peace? And how optimistic is he, therefore, about the resolve and commitment that he will secure from the Coalition of the Willing later today?
Well, I'm grateful to I'm very confident about the assurance from the Coalition of Willing, because we've already agreed plans between the countries and the Coalition of Willing that are as advanced now as they can be until we know the next stage of the process. Obviously, what I want to ensure is that that is forged or welded together with US guarantees alongside of the Coalition of Willing, which will be then the strongest possible guarantees.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister welcomed the inclusion in the 28-point peace plan of security guarantees. Point 10 of the proposed plan says if Russia invades Ukraine, it would lead to a decisive, coordinated military response. Who would coordinate that response, and what does the Prime Minister anticipate would be the UK's part in it?
I thank him for his question. Without going to the details, but the plans that the Coalition of Willing have drawn up are about capability and coordination and command structures, and therefore a huge amount of military work has gone into exactly how that would operate in practice. So these aren't simply countries saying, here's some capability that I'm prepared to put on the table, as it were. They're military plans capable of being put into effect when they're needed.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for all his efforts on ramping up the economic pressure on Putin, including oil and gas and the shadow fleet. On the $300+ billion of Russian sovereign banking assets in the West, we know there are a few holdouts in the European Union who don't want to mobilise this loan backed by those assets as a down payment on reparations. Could he update us on what progress has been made to get that over the line and get that money moving?
Well, I thank him, and a proposal has been put forward in relation to how the assets could possibly be used. Obviously, that does require a high level of agreement by various interested parties. That's why extensive discussions are going on as to how we can make that progress. But there's no pretending that it's simple and straightforward. It isn't, but that shouldn't stop us trying to make further progress.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I understand that the order of the day when dealing with Mr. Trump is flattery. I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, that 42 years of experience in this House haven't yet qualified me for that level of sycophancy. The presentation of a Kremlin wish list by the White House as a peace plan is risible, something that the Prime Minister has indicated rather more elegantly than I am myself. Would the Prime Minister seriously consider, if necessarily unilaterally, ensuring that the legislation goes through so that the frozen Russian assets can be used to support the Ukrainian war effort?
On the assets, I do want to make progress. My strong view is that if we're to make progress, it's better that as many countries as possible act at the same time. And that's what we're trying to achieve. If we do that, obviously, we will take whatever steps are necessary. But at the moment, my focus is on those discussions to try to progress this discussion, which has been difficult and fraught with risk, but nonetheless, there is a willingness, I think, to move forward on it. And then other discussions I had in the margins of the G20 were with countries outside of Europe to see whether they will act at the same time along with us if we get that far, because I do think it's important to do so.
Alex Barris-Curtis.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very proud to represent Cardiff West in this place. Nathan Gill, the former leader of Reform UK and Wales, was elected to serve the people of Wales in the European Parliament. But as we now know, he served not only himself but the interests of Russia, having admitted not one, not two, but 8 counts of bribery, and is now serving 10.5 years in imprisonment. So I know the Prime Minister will join me in condemning this treachery, but will he also join me in demanding that the leadership of Reform UK, who unfortunately typically can't be present here today, launch that independent investigation into this act of treason?
Well, he puts the point very powerfully, and it must be uncomfortable to hear this for the Reform Party. This is completely undermining our national security. It can't be right for a political party represented in this House to simply close their eyes and ears to this. There has to be an investigation. There has to be a level of reassurance that there aren't other links to Russia within the Reform Party and how this came about in the first place. And so this question is very good. It should be deeply uncomfortable for Reform MPs to be sitting in this House, hearing this, knowing they're sitting on their hands and doing absolutely nothing about it.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I remind the House that last year I personally donated a 5-figure sum, bought a pickup truck, filled it with first aid supplies, and drove it with other friends and colleagues to Ukraine and donated it to the brave soldiers of Ukraine. So my support and Reform support for Ukraine has been rock solid, Prime Minister, throughout. And it is important that this House is united, which it is, Madam Deputy Speaker. And last week, when the 28-point plan emerged, we rejected it immediately. Just yesterday, Prime Minister, I was with a Ukrainian delegation, and we were talking specifically about the leverage that the European nations has with regard to the frozen assets, the majority of which, of course, are here in Europe. So would I urge the Prime Minister, amongst all of the noise, to utilise that leverage, because that, I think, is one of the most powerful negotiating points that the West has against the vile dictator Putin.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he could have stood up and said that Reform's seen sense and decided they will have an investigation in relation to what happened in this bribery case. And I don't doubt that he drove and personally committed in relation to support. But the simple fact is this: you can't be pro-Putin and pro-Ukraine. You have to decide between the two, and Reform is pro-Putin, and that is why they undermine. Well, they've just been convicted, a 10-year sentence for bribe for what? Taking pro-Russian bribes. It couldn't be clearer than that, and an unwillingness to say we need to investigate how on earth that happened. Can he not see the inconsistency in what he's saying?
Rachel Maskell, and then I'll be calling Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is feared that the brutality in El Fasher will only intensify and also spread to Tooele and beyond if international action isn't convened and focused on the resolutions that are needed, not least to stop the incursions with drones supplied via the UAE and mercenaries as well. Could the Prime Minister say more about what happened in South Africa to put that focus which is necessary and what the next steps are to stop the expansion of the atrocities we're witnessing in Sudan?
Can I thank you for raising Sudan, because what was an appalling situation is even more appalling over recent days and weeks. And we discussed it pretty extensively in the G20 and support the work that the Quad is doing in relation to this. And that is aimed predominantly at a ceasefire and the provision of humanitarian aid. This is the worst humanitarian situation in the world, and bringing about a better resolution. Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just do my best to update the House in relation to the news? As I understand it, and this is coming to me secondhand, so I'm not, if this turns out to be not entirely accurate, I hope the House will forgive me. I'll come back and correct the record. But my understanding is this is not a new agreement. It is Ukraine confirming they're happy with the draft that emerged in Geneva yesterday, which of course doesn't cover the question of territory. So my best understanding is this is a confirmation of basically what came out of Geneva, that it isn't a new set of proposals or agreements in any way. So I think that's what it is. If I get more information, I'll update the House and we can discuss it in due course.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister talks of having extensive discussions about limiting the export of oil and gas from Russia. This is the engine that is driving the machine of the war effort from Russia. The Danish waters could offer the key to killing the shadow fleet. With an international convention regulating the shipping going through those straits, that would stop the shadow fleet and stop a significant part of this shadow fleet activity supporting Russia. It would also drive environmental support for this area with the stronger regulations with this convention. What consideration has the Prime Minister and his colleagues given to this?
Can I thank you for raising this, because how we deal with the shadow fleet is something we discuss regularly, and Danish authorities can do a lot and do a lot in their waters, as do Norway and other countries in the region, and we are looking at what further we could do in relation to the shadow fleet, because his underlying point is hugely important, which is the oil and gas are fueling Russia's aggression here, and that's why we need to ensure that oil and gas is taken off the market. That can only happen if we deal, amongst other things, with the shadow fleet.
Graham Downey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for his continued support of Ukraine. Can I, furthermore, going back to the announcement at the G20 regarding the £4 billion deal with Indonesia, can I thank the Prime Minister for his efforts in securing that maritime partnership programme for Babcock, which will benefit people in my constituency, securing hundreds of jobs. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that that is testament to the skills and experience of the workforce at Rosyth, and will he continue to do everything that he can to support shipbuilding in Scotland and at Rosyth in particular?
This is such an important point, because winning these deals, whether it's the Indonesia deal that we finally finished concluding whilst we're at the G20, or the Norway frigate deal as well, it is only possible for us as a country to conclude those deals where we have to compete against others in the world. The frigate deal was against France, Germany and the United States because of the quality of the workforce, their professionalism and commitment to delivering on time. And that is why, after the Norway frigate deal, I went up to the Clyde to see the workforce, to say thank you to them, constituents.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, signals matter. Right now, Putin thinks he's getting his own way. So, regarding even the answers the Prime Minister has given about the G7, can I just ask the Prime Minister, as a point of principle, would he sit around a table if the indicted war criminal Putin was sat at it?
No, I wouldn't. And I took my first opportunity at the United Nations Security Council when I was there last year, my first opportunity as Prime Minister, be very, very clear as to where I stand in relation to, in that case, the Security Council, but the principle applies elsewhere. You cannot be or subscribe to international law and the UN Charter if you're in breach of it by this illegal war.
Patricia Ferguson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for the work he is doing to secure peace in Ukraine, and I also thank him for his very good comments about BAE Systems, which is partially located in my constituency of Glasgow West. Point 24 of the Trump plan indicates that one of the things that should happen as part of that plan is that all civilian detainees and hostages will be returned, including children. The kidnapping of children is such a heinous thing to do, and a war crime in and of itself, that surely, as a mark of good faith, Putin shouldn't wait for any agreement on this plan or other plans, but should release those children immediately. And in saying that, I pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Paisley and Renfrewshire South, for the work she has done over many months on this issue. But would he also agree with me that point 26 of that plan, which says that all parties involved in this conflict will receive full amnesty for their actions during the war and agree not to make any claims or consider any complaints in the future, cannot be tolerated?
Well, can I agree with her on both fronts? Of course, these children should be released straight away. They should never have been taken in the first place, and it's heartbreaking as well as intolerable that they're held for a moment longer. And as for amnesty, no, I do not agree with amnesty for Putin and others for their illegal acts.
Dr Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm deeply concerned that it appears that American negotiators have been listening more to the unreasonable demands of the Russian aggressors rather than to the security needs of the Ukrainians. Can the Prime Minister assure me that in his conversations with President Trump, he has made absolutely clear that the voices of Ukrainians have to be front and centre in securing any just and lasting peace?
I can assure her that in all my discussions, the principles I set out to the House, that matters on the future of Ukraine must be for Ukraine, have been the guiding principles in everything that we've done.
Olivia Blake.